welcome to another episode of our series talking about handmade, historical handmade and how it changed up until today. We'll be talking about another handmade technique that you can meet in Poland. Enjoy! Welcome to another episode of our series, Handmade That It Used to Be in the Olden Days and How It Is Today. And today, I'll bring you a conversation between Justyna and Magda. It's close to my heart because both of them are members of our association Oplotki. Therefore, I won't go any further into this introducing the idea. I'll just jump into the straight interview. So, Magda. Who is Magda? Well, Magda, she's been living in Hague in the Netherlands for over 9 years. And she admitted that she sees herself as a craftswoman with a passion for the history of craftsmanship. As a creative person, she doesn't have a favorite field of craftsmanship. She thinks she's more fascinated by the process of learning the technique itself and its history rather than staying in one technique only. She's obviously the member of our association, and it's remotely, connected, this idea. With the association, she has the common idea, like this common goal of popularizing handcrafting, and she admitted that she's very inspired. She's also a volunteer in Poland or Polskie Worowen in Segerbrook. Sorry for my pronunciation, and I'm not really good at Netherlands names. It's a group of women who help each other in exile. Today, at the day when she was recording this interview with Justyna, she's going to talk about Lucets, Bartko, slates, and kneading needles. Hope it sounds interesting. And today I'm going to provide you with this quick translation of this conversation. And obviously the whole episode in Polish you can find as a last episode underneath this very one. So last Monday was the Polish one, and today we're jumping into this English one. So, as you might think, it sounds like forgotten techniques. And Magda says that they are early medieval techniques, although they served our ancestors to make the things they needed throughout the Middle Ages. These are knitting things, all four of which she mentioned, and they are not very complicated to handle. She thinks that today everyone can sit back and knit what they need using these instruments. That's why those techniques are so fascinating. Okay, so what is this Lucet thing? So in Poland we also call it a knitting fork. As Magda admitted, she said that knitting fork is a name very appropriate to the appearance of the instrument, because it looks like a modern fork, except for the lack of middle tines. You can easily make it at home. You weave knitting wool around 2 tines on the sides and drag it in a very simple way to create a square string. It is quite resilient, very nice. Today, we have flat, round cords, and this one has such an original design. You just turn it on each side and it'll be square. And you might ask what that cord could be used for, right? So as Magda said, it could be used, for example, to tie around the waist on a dress. You could sew appliques on a dress or a neckline, right? You could also, for example, wear a hanging pouch or current purse, like a nowadays modern purse. So it was a very useful thing in the olden days as well. Another very useful knitting tool is Bartko. It is a wooden slate with holes for the knitting wool. You have to put it through the holes and then in the right way to put it in those holes, and then additionally weave the wool back and forth similarly to how it's done on a handle. The difference is that you need to use at least 4 of them to create a weaved product. Of course, you can use many more, but 4 is the minimum. They are square and have holes on both sides, through which you weave your thread.
The difference between both instruments is that on the Bartko, you can weave simple square patterns, more geometrical. And what you weave on a handle comes with a diagonal pattern, a diamond-like, so to speak. And she said she must admit that handles are more complicated for her. The Bartko is easier to her. And she says it's easier to use, so if one wants to start learning how to weave, she would advise to use this one. Okay, so what was the made, of the Bartko and the slates? So the Bartko and slates were used to create selvages. A selvage is a narrow, colorful strip used mainly for tying around the waist, for sewing on the edges of dresses so they won't tear too quickly. However, if we typically talk about the Middle Ages, they had another use. They were to protect the person who wore them. The modern equivalent of a selvage will be haberdashery tape. When Magda was reading books about the selvages, she found very interesting applications. That selvages were used for tying up babies. And in one book, it was even written that a child placed straight was immobilized, wrapped with selvage, and was supposed to avoid rickets. She associated that with the modern baby wrapping techniques. So, as you might suspect, that also if baby slings or even babies wore those elements, selvages are also used in a folk costume till this very day. So they were popular, for everyday use, but they kind of were preserved to modern day as part of folk costume that we might see in museums. As Magda admitted, it depends on the region. What was in the early Middle Ages also goes on to our times. Certain elements as if they were preserved, like color, selection of cuts. She thinks that you can look for some kind of analogy in everything, but it is fascinating how our ancestors managed to have warm and nice and practical clothes, but also in their opinion it was to protect them from evil, evil spirits or demons. Today we wear jewelry for decoration, and women of that time wore it to protect themselves. The jewelry was an amulet. And the lucet, Magda mentions at the beginning, was also used to make jewelry. For example, you could make a bracelet with this device. Okay, so now let's go into this kneading needle. Okay, we've got some tools, and we also mentioned the knitting needle at the beginning. So the kneading needle, as Magda mentioned, is a very nice instrument. She admitted that it is both the more complicated and yet the most simple device, because it kind of reminds the modern needle. It's made of wood. The length is different. It varies from 6 up to 12 centimeters. It has a hole in the middle, and the hole is at least 3 millimeters. And through those holes, you drag the yarn. And with this, you make, for example, socks, gloves, or hats. Well, Magda admits that today in Poland, the weaving with a knitting needle has probably disappeared. And when she wanted to learn this way, she had to look for information in Swedish or Norwegian sources. There, the needle is still used. Beautiful decorations are still made. And as she said, there in Netherlands as well. Once on the streets, she saw a girl wearing a needle-binding outfit. It was different from a crochet needle, so it caught her attention. The girl was fascinately dressed. She had a hat and gloves, and this weave is really quite different. So if you want to have something special, different from your neighbors, Magda especially encourages you to learn how to weave with a knitting needle. To start with, she recommends the simplest stitch called Oslo, so that you can take the first steps. And when asked, about the lucet often used nowadays, is it often used or not? She thinks, as Justina mentioned, that could be a tool for jewelry using gold or silver thread. Magda just admitted that you can do that, but she said that if someone makes soutache jewelry, those soutache threads would be a great base instead of wool. So if you take those threads and weave with them, you'll have a completely new original product made the old way. Okay, and are the lucet and forks in different sizes? Can the cord have a different width? As Magda said, it can. She has also seen a double-sided lucets. If you don't want to have too many instruments, you can use the double-sided lucet, which is like two lucets combined. On one side, it has a wider, and on the other, narrower tines. And it's very handy. If one feels like can make it at home, like it's so simple, then you can just, cut it in the middle, and then you have two of them. So you have a kind of, middle tines of a wooden fork, and there you have a device for a knitting tool. So it's really easy to make it on your own. So you can make cords of different width with wool of different thickness. As Magda admitted, there are two methods. One is that you can make a cord and sew this cord in the right way, while the other method may be a little more difficult, but effects are faster. You can make a kind of a base of the string, and then interlacing on the lucet, you can make a circle. So for example, if you want to make a coaster, you don't have to sew it because using this method of interlacing results with a coaster, a final product. This can be very interesting because it will probably look completely different from the crochet hook. And Magda admitted that those cup holders seem more stable to her. The square weave is constant, and such a coaster is more stable, or a basket won't bulge out. It will stand straight. It won't be just so loose as with a crochet yarn. And are those instruments used to reconstruct costumes? We talk about historical tools, so that question might be quite obvious, right? As Magda admitted, without this, it wouldn't have worked. So the reconstructors wouldn't have any way to recreate those olden outfits. She thinks that they have a very wide knowledge and are very willing to share it at the historical festivals. You can approach to ask and touch. It is a very nice handicraft historical experience. She must also say that today it is possible to weave a pendant or a wall decoration using Bartko. If someone wants to decorate their apartment in such a way, because we are constantly talking about, selvage, while Bartko also has its different width. So this fabric woven with Bartko can also be very, very wide. And are the colors and patterns also historical? Or can you design your pattern like this? As Magda said, she thinks those are like slightly limited possibilities when it comes to the pattern, because Bartko gives a simple weave of, grills. Other patterns with dominant vertical lines, while the slates, this is more of a diagonal weave, only limits us to these two ways of weaving. But the colors, however, the choice of yarn and the material today is almost unlimited. So we can also use linen threads and weave linen into it, as well as acrylic. Anything you can think of. So not only, flax and cotton were mostly used. Mostly in the olden days, the wool was in use. But now we've got a way broader selection of those materials. So Magda was really flattered with this opportunity to talk about the story of Lucet, of Bartko. And I hope that there will be still a chance to introduce her works and her insights into those olden techniques. So for that, I warmly encourage you to visit our Facebook page or blog and listen and even see some more. It's obviously even easier to grasp the idea of those techniques on the pictures. So I gladly introduce you to way more that we have about those techniques in the olden days and today in Magda's interpretation on our website. So see you in the next episode.